first of all, lockdowns have been shown not to be effective. And this is based on many published studies already. And one of the first observations was made by Professor Michael Levitt in China. And he noticed that the numbers of deaths and cases were already dropping down even before lockdowns. And then it's already December. There are more than 22 published studies already which shows it doesn't work. Second, lockdowns are expensive, not only of economy, but of employment, of deaths, from misdiagnosis, from mishealth cases, because we're concentrating too much on COVID. So, in fact, I think they quoted the WHO that 130 million people are expected to be hungry this year because of lockdown limitations caused on the worldwide economy. So that's a big number, 130 million people. So,
But on the other hand, doctors, nakikita naman natin what happens kapag hindi naman nagla-lockdown. Because like in Europe and in the US, they're seeing second and third waves. And nakikita, they trace it to the return of the movement of people and the gathering of more people, the opening of businesses where people can gather like in restaurants, dining, mga gyms. Ano bang nakakalito na, di ba? Paano naman yon kapag ganon yung nakikita natin?
Yeah, it's like this. There will be new cases, and different countries will have new cases, another wave, so to speak. But lockdowns don't affect them. They happen because they will happen. Because it's coming into winter, so most seasonal viruses actually increase with in winter. But countries, for example, like Sweden, who did not have lockdowns, have been less affected. So it actually just shows you how lockdowns don't really work. Because if a country like Sweden that did not lock down are getting less numbers now, so that seems to be the opposite of what's happening. Because we're trying to say that the reason there are cases because they are lifting lockdowns. That is not causal. Hindi siya direct relationship. It might be increasing because of other reasons.
Like what? Like what would be the other reason?
Yeah, like for example, it's getting into winter, so that's one of the reasons.
Yun na nga.
Yeah, and then there's also, because lockdowns have actually caused us to be unhealthier. We have less vitamin D, for example. Of course, people, as we go old by 1 year, people develop diabetes. Some people get obese during this period from the last time that we had the first wave. But as you notice, the new wave is not as big as the first one. And that's classic of most viruses. And many books about how viruses behave, it's like that. You have a first wave that's big, and then the following one is not so big.
Well, Doc Iggy, if you could just walk us back a little bit, I just want to be sure that we're all clear, and especially the audience, that the audience is very clear with regard to this point of view. Because to a lot of people, it does sound, counterintuitive, and it does sound like it goes against everything else that we've been told in the last 8 or 9 months. So para lang po klaro, so ang sinasabi po ninyo, and tell me if I'm getting this right, sabi po ninyo, dapat wala ng lockdowns and people should just go about their business because that is one way of getting infected is one way of getting immunity as well. Please tell me if I'm getting it right.
Yeah. Actually, it's not exactly like that, but yes, we want to lift the lockdowns because it doesn't work. But it doesn't mean we're not going to do anything. So what it means is that people think actually that if you don't have lockdowns, but if you isolate the sick, you protect the vulnerable, it's enough. It's enough to protect people from dying. It's enough to control the disease. Lockdowns in itself, where you have to stop school, for example, where it's already a known fact that children hardly get sick from this disease, and yet we are not allowing schools to open. So that's an example of how lockdowns don't work. You lock down the children, you don't let them go to school, but it won't have an effect.
Actually, I'll move it a step further. No, they're not even allowed in malls because precisely their conventional wisdom about COVID nga is such that children are essentially vulnerable, no? So can we lay down the facts about COVID from your point of view? I don't even know whether to call it facts, but information. Yeah, because right now we're so confused as to the quote unquote facts about COVID, no?
Yeah.
So what information or data are you holding that makes you believe that the lockdowns are not effective and that really we should loosen up?
Yeah, in fact, you just check the WHO. You will see the data there that there's a 1,000-fold difference of people dying if they are elderly than from children. For example, in Sweden, their schools are open, and about 1.8 million children went to school since 7 months ago, and there are zero deaths. So that's
But
data.
they can argue, yes, but people can argue that that's Sweden, eh?
No,
And
not just Sweden. I just gave an example.
Yeah.
But worldwide, you can see the data of, just look at the US, check out how many children have died, how many got infected. And you even check China, Italy, Spain, it's there. But I just gave you a specific example. You go ahead, check the internet, it's there. It's not something that's been hidden.
I think naman, I suppose with that regard, I mean, that does sound logical nga naman eh. The elderly are more vulnerable than the children. So I suppose that would work. Pero ito rin po eh, the other part of the equation is this eh, that especially in the Philippines, you have children living with adults and the elderly all in one residence, all in one house. So in that case po, even if we do what one might call I don't know, focused lockdown with regard to the vulnerable elderly, would that even work?
Yeah, there's also evidence that for children 9 and below, the risk of infecting an adult is very, very low. So there's even evidence of that. But I agree that if it's 9 and above, they're actually like adults already. They can infect the elderly and the vulnerable, and therefore certain strategies have to be done to correct that. But of course, there's a bigger damage from not allowing children to go to school. So that must also be put into the equation. And so many countries have already opened up school. It's have worse numbers than the Philippines. Italy, Germany, even the UK have already opened up their schools. They have worse numbers than ours, and yet we haven't opened ours.
So,
let's also bring in. Let's also bring in Dr.
Dr. Homer.
Dr. Homer. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So actually, yes. Go ahead.
No, sige, you go ahead. Lilinawin lang namin kasi, you are against the lockdowns, but you are not against the health protocols that are being implemented, like physical distancing.
Yeah, we're not against that.
Yes.
You're not against that.
Yes.
So if you're pushing
we're not. What we want to ask is if we can actually open up the economy without limiting the movements of people who just want to go to work. I mean, if they can go to work, then at least give them some form of a chance or hope that they can survive this pandemic. So if we just allow them to move around, get them to make their living, because a lot of people cannot work. It's so sad to see people not being able to work because of this lockdown. But of course, we still want to advocate, wearing masks, social distancing, washing your hands. But just to give you an example of whether lockdowns are working or not, just look at our numbers here at NCR. Haven't you noticed that our numbers have been stable despite opening up our economies, increasing our capacity in our transportation? You just go to the Vistoria. Just imagine how many people are close together, shoulder to shoulder. Did you see a sudden uptick of cases in NCR? No. What you see now are higher cases in Cebu and Davao. So, can anyone in the, the authorities or the DOH, ITF, can they explain why suddenly in NCR we have some form of stabilization of numbers, because this is not the natural life we call it as life cycle of a viral infection. It's either you go up or you go down. It's not like, stable. So there's some form of immunity already going on that we should also be aware of, that we should be looking into. And how do we boost our immune system? How do we protect the vulnerable by giving them the necessary vitamins, supplements to boost their infection and protect them from being infected? I think that's what the issue is, concerns a lot of people, is if we end the lockdown, it's going to be free for all. No, it's not like that. We still protect them, give them the necessary vitamins or minerals or supplements to protect them. I think that's what we should look into.
But Doctor, on the other hand, they're saying, di ba, they're waiting for a possible surge after the holidays because of the crowding. Not immediately or while nagkakaroon na itong ganitong mga gulo nga sa, hindi naman gulo, kundi crowding in Divisoria.
Ma'am,
That's
if you, yes, ma'am, if you go to Divisoria for the last 1 month na, punong-puno po sila sa Divisoria. So, you should already see an uptick in Manila, in Quezon City, or the whole NCR. So, but there's none. It's only, and Quezon City, Pasig, up and down, but it's not really an uptick. To say, it's like, you're trying to predict already or program the mindset of everyone that, after holidays, we're gonna have super number of COVID infections. I think that's a wrong way, because now you're promoting more fear. We don't want to promote more fear. We want them to become more confident about themselves, about their their life, because right now, for the last 9 months, we've been hiding under what? This COVID, we are paralyzed, right? And it's not really helping everyone.
Okay, doctors, don't get us wrong. I think we all agree that we want to have as much mobility as we can. We want to be able to move around. We want to open up the economy. I think everybody agrees on that. As we don't want the restrictions imposed on us. But at the same time, there are concerns that, and you can't avoid these concerns. There are concerns that the more movement that you have, the more transmissions you'll probably have. So if I may ask for you, if I may ask for you, you guys, you doctors, say, how will you convince people? How will you convince government, for example, that having people moving around, even with the protocols, even with physical distancing, even with masks, having more people in the streets, in the malls, in their offices, will not result in more infections with more aerosols moving around. Diba? It does sound counterintuitive po kasi. To be honest, it does sound counterintuitive. How will you convince people that works?
We don't actually want people just to start crowding around and not follow protocols. But we want a smarter strategy, because the reason there is a smarter strategy, believe it or not, there's a WHO 2019 pandemic plan. Now that 2019 there's a WHO 2019 pandemic plan in October.
Okay.
There was already a plan just in case something like this happened. And it did not involve lockdowns. It did not involve quarantining big cities. It did not involve that. What it involved was isolating the sick, protecting the vulnerable part of the society. So there was a plan, and it was not suddenly just thought of as an experiment. So matagal na yan, 10 years ago para pinaplano yan, and in 2019 they published it. It's on the net. Type it down, WHO 2019 pandemic plan. So, what happened? Someone pushed for lockdown because of the Imperial College of London's prediction of the numbers. They thought, based on their predictions, there will be 200 million people dying worldwide. But
so the mortality, it's the mortality that
is what they predicted. Yeah, it was 200 million, and right now it's around 1.5 million. So they actually overestimated it. So they've been blamed for that, but they've said it's the worst scenario prediction. So they're saying, why don't we go to a little bit to the reality, where it's really 1.5 million. This is a pandemic. it will cause problems, it will cause deaths, but it's not as bad as it was predicted. So we should just go back to the original plan, which is not locking down.
And we also have to put into context. We have to put into context. If we have the COVID pandemic, it doesn't mean that there will be no more people dying from tuberculosis, the flu, cancer, heart disease. It's still going to be there. I think that's what we have to consider and look at the bigger picture. You're preventing people to go to the hospital because everybody is scared to death of getting COVID, to the point that they'd rather die at home because they don't want to go to the hospital. So I think we have to consider that.
I'll give you another statistics that's very helpful. In 2015, there was a study in the Philippines that predicted how many people died from the flu. And their number
I was going to ask you how to compare it with, say, the flu. Paano nga ba?
In 2015, but this study was from 2006 to 2015. But in 2015, it's around 8,000 people died from the flu in the Philippines. So we did not lock down then, and I guess we simply did, So we simply did the usual thing: isolate the sick. They got hospitalized, isolated, and they were treated. But 8,000 people died then. And as you know, the numbers now of COVID in the last almost 10 months is 8,500. So it's not much.
So you're saying, are you saying this is just a little worse than the flu?
It is.
And
this number,
definitely.
This number is not my opinion. Okay, it's the WHO themselves published a paper by Professor Ioannidis. It's there on the internet. Ioannidis is a highly respected doctor, very well published. That's why the WHO published it. And he gave a prediction of the infection fatality rate for COVID. And it's around 0.2% to 0.26%. And flu is 0.1%.
But in the Philippines now, our mortality rate is what? At 1.9, I think.
But the reason our mortality rate is 1 point something is because we are only counting those that have been tested. So the way they compute it worldwide is they use the antibodies. So they would make a survey of antibodies in a country, for example. They would actually now predict better how many people had COVID than what we do. Just sino lang na test, siya lang yung nagka-COVID. So, siyempre, liliit yung denominator mo, lalaki yung number. So, the way they did it in New York, in China, in Germany, so the numbers are like 0.2 points. In fact, some countries are even much less, 0.01%. So, our country, just looking at our numbers, I think because we haven't really tested as much as the US or Germany, we might be even near 0.01. If just looking at our numbers now.
Wow.
Okay, Dr. Iggy and Dr. Homer, we just need to go into a break. So, but we do hope that you can stay with us during the break, so we can come back with you after the break. So please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. And still with us are Doctors Iggy Agbayani and Homer Lim. For this, welcome back, doctors. We're discussing, this is a really interesting discussion. No? Kasi yung lockdowns, I remember, the proponents of lockdowns will say na kaya lang hindi na-achieve yung 200 million because in fact the word lockdown, yun naman ang sinasabi nila. And we all had this example of Wuhan where we believe that the virus originated. They were the first to lock, followed by the province, Hubei. And in fact, it was endorsed by the World Health Organization kaya nagsunuran lahat.
Right.
So ano ngayon? In fact, that's why we follow. After the WHO endorsed it, di ba? Kaya medyo na tayo mag-lockdown. Yeah, but that's what we do. Ngayon nga, nag-open up na tayo. So ano yung, kaya nagugulaan pa rin kami. But anong masasabi nyo doon sa, yun yung mga proponents ng lockdown?
Well, yes. Yung sa China, for example, they locked down quite early, but they already had it much earlier.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, that one of the best scientists that evaluated was Michael Levitt, a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, saw that there was a pattern that even without lockdowns, the spread of the virus actually slowed down naturally. So that's one. Now, with regards to the WHO saying that lockdown should be done, actually in October, around the first week of October, especially when the Great Barrington Declaration came out with their statement, one of the deputy attaché to the WHO chief had said that the primary use of lockdowns should be the last resort, and it's there. It's his name is Dr. Navarra. It's on the net. He came out in October. It's on the news. We should not be on lockdowns for that long because it was just designed to help us manage the initial effect of an unknown virus. And they also said that countries that are very poor are worse affected by lockdowns. And that's us. So how come we're still there? It's already 9 months. When it should have been a last resort. The WHO said this. I did not say it, and you can check it on the net. It's there.
Okay, I think the most remarkable example of a country that did not go on lockdown but is now suffering from the major wave of COVID is the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was saying that that's what they got from following Donald Trump when he rebelled against the wearing of masks and extensive lockdowns. What do you say to that?
Yeah. I've studied the data as well sa United States. The US kasi is so big. There's a northern part, a southern part. So some states got it hard hit, like New York, New Jersey, and some other, and California, I think. So they had high numbers at the start. But now those states have lower numbers. Now, what's increasing the numbers in the U.S. now are the states that did not have much of COVID in the early months. So they're like not really plateauing because it's such a big country. But for example, Florida, check out Florida. It has not been on lockdown for about 4 months. Even masks, they don't even mask in Florida. They have very good numbers now. They're actually better than at least 10 states that are still on lockdown in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So there's data for that. You just have to check. Kasi sometimes what we hear from some media sites are sort of slanted. So, but we check the actual data.
Okay, does this explain New York, for example, nga? Diba, New York also locked down, Italy also locked down, but the numbers were really unusually high.
Now the numbers are manageable in New York. So what you see are U.S. numbers, but if you look at the numbers in New York, it's now relatively low. In fact, they were forced to open schools in New York because their test positivity rate was less than 5%. So they were asking, why should we close school? They were fighting the teachers who wanted it closed, when in fact their numbers are not even high. So they are forced to open their schools.
So what do you attribute the high numbers earlier in New York? What do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, any new virus would trigger high numbers because there's no previous exposure to immunity. Second, they have a very high. It's an urban place, so very crowded. Third, the age, their average age is about 83. So as we've learned, above 60, there's a higher percentage of people dying. Fourth, there's a high obesity rate in the U.S. Fifth, their African Americans were affected more than the Caucasians. That's because of vitamin D issues. Because if you have dark skin, you don't get enough vitamin D. So there are many reasons for that. The last one, and I think is most important, is that they did not manage their nursing homes well. That is part of the focus protection. If we had tried focus protection, we'd have put all the energies to protect those nursing homes. But no, we protected everyone, so that's why it didn't work that well.
But so what are we doing right naman? Yung mask wearing, yung distancing sa public transportation.
Yes.
Are we doing that right? Okay lang yun
Yes.
sa inyo. Kasi medyo
Yes,
parang
there-
yung distancing in transportation at this point, okay lang yun. Na
Yes,
medyo
I think-
nakikita na siya.
I think there's evidence to show that if the public transport system is really very crowded, it is one of those things that causes an increase in numbers. So that is something that we should be careful with more than practically anything in the Philippines. Because siyempre magmi-mix talaga yun. As you know, as everyone knows in the Philippines, talagang packed ang ating public transport system. But I think we've been doing our work well. We're trying to do online things. We encourage yung bicycle use.
Yes.
We found other ways to do work from home, etc. To try to limit the numbers of public transport. And maybe the government has done something to improve our public transport system as well. It's been 9 months after all.
Doctors, well, conversely, some people might also say that if you don't have a lockdown, then physical distancing may be virtually impossible, whether it's in the malls, in the marketplaces, or in public transportation, because you would have the regular number of people, almost a regular number of people, going around and interacting with each other. So even there, you might have a problem with physical distancing, which is still part of the protocols that you would still want to put in
Agree.
keep in place.
Agree. But this is the thing about focus protection. You might limit by time the elderly and the vulnerable. For example, they can go to the malls 8 to 9 or 8 to 10 in the morning. MW. That's an example. Even public transport, you might prepare certain public transport systems that are for the vulnerable and the elderly. So we have to create strategies that are smart. That's my point. So you don't have to be limiting people who are likely not to get sick and affect even worse our economy, for example.
Dr. Homer, you can jump in anytime.
Yes. Dr. Homer has a solution also.
Yeah.
Yes,
So actually, one of the things, aside from the ending of or trying to lift the lockdowns, we also want to advocate what we call the early treatment protocols. No, so early treatment meaning you don't wait for the person who is infected with COVID to be sick enough to go to the hospital. So you treat them as early as possible. So when is as early? The moment you have symptoms, okay? While you're still awaiting for the results of your test, your COVID test, you already start treating the patient. So that if in case the patient is positive, you already have that protection. You're already giving them treatments even before you get the results of the COVID, because most of sadly some of the test comes out 3 to 4 days, and especially for those who are over 65, those 3 days are the golden period. You miss that opportunity to treat them, they're going to be worse off and they're going to be ending up. So personally, I
And what would be the treatment? What would the treatment entail?
Yes.
Yeah, the treatment
you mentioned
entails.
some vitamins. You mentioned some vitamins.
Yeah. So okay. So in sa basic, for those who are, let's say, they're elderly or they have what we call risk factors or comorbidity, we started on vitamin C, at least 3,000 milligrams a day, vitamin D, 5,000 units a day, and then some zinc. That's why, a lot of vitamins now with zinc are always out of stock. 50 milligrams a day, and then you have what we call the quercetin. Quercetin is it's a phytochemical that works well with zinc in preventing the COVID virus or the SARS-CoV virus from penetrating your body. So these are what we call immune boosting supplements. Okay.
Like
So
what?
now,
Like
however, yes.
like what? Like what? What supplements? Virgin coconut oil, pwede ba yan? Because
Yeah, virgin coconut oil, you can use that. Yes, you can also use that as a form of to boost your immune system to prevent.
Lagundi.
VCO also has some antiviral properties, no?
Yes.
But however, for treatment, no, for treatment of COVID infections, this is where the controversy lies again, because Trump has mentioned hydroxychloroquine, but aside from hydroxychloroquine, there's also ivermectin. So hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin have been shown when used early, okay, when used early outpatient, meaning they're not in the hospital, they're at home or in a facility, you treat them, the risk of being hospitalized or dying is almost at least 80%. And there is data. I mean, a lot of doctors keep on saying there's no data. We've shown that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. But if you really look at the data, if they really go through all the data, they will see that there is a positive effect of these antiviral medications. So, in fact, there's already in the United States, there's already been 2 Senate hearings on early outpatient treatment for COVID infection. So I think that's now the most important step aside from lifting the lockdown is we advocate early treatment. So IATF been saying we do test, we do trace, and then we isolate or quarantine. How about early treatment? If they're in the isolation or in the hospital they have symptoms, shouldn't you at least start them on some form of antibiotics to prevent them to having a more serious disease? I think that's common sense. That's basic medical science. That's what we do. If you get a cold or cough, you take medicine because you don't want to get worse. The same thing. So why do you have to wait for the COVID virus to make you so sick that you have to go to the hospital? So I think we have to change our way of thinking with regards to treating COVID infections.
Ano bang status ngayon ng hydrochloroquine? Bawal ba siya ngayon? Are hospitals recommended or told to avoid the use of hydrochloroquine?
Well, in March, yes. Okay, so in March of this year, DOH already came out with a memo allowing the use of antivirals or antimicrobial as an off-label treatment for COVID. So it is allowed. We're allowed to use hydroxychloroquine. Yes. The memo is still there. You can go to the DOH website, look at the policies. It's in March of 2020. So you could see there that that's why they were able to use remdesivir for hospitalized patients because again off-label treatments, off-label antivirals or antibacterial COVID infection. It's not true to say that it's illegal to use all these antivirals. And also in the American Medical Association did the same thing. Last week they rescinded their ban on hydroxychloroquine in the United States. So now American doctors are now able to prescribe hydroxychloroquine for their patients in the United States.
Doctors, there's a lot of excitement about the vaccines now, Since I want to know what you think about these latest developments. There are people who are worried that the vaccines were developed too quickly, record time, and they're worried about the consequences. What are your views on this? I'm talking about the Pfizer, of course, the ones that are coming on stream being rolled out, including the ones from China and Russia.
Yeah.
Well, again, because these are what we call, Go ahead, Iggy.
Sige. Well, first of all, we believe in vaccines. We're not saying that vaccines are bad. We're not anti-vaxxers. We've been tagged as anti-vaxxers. But we believe in vaccines. However, we also believe that vaccines should be properly tested and up to when it's already wide use in the phase 4 of the vaccine trials. It should not be already be advertised as completely safe if you haven't even finished phase 4. Secondly, this is an mRNA vaccine. There's never been a vaccine like this before. So you should not just say it's the same as the other vaccines because it's a new one. So in my opinion, it's still experimental. So it should not be just considered as, of course, it will be safe like the other vaccines. You should wait a while, or at least let the phase 4 trials finish.
But Doc, what's the implication of it being an mRNA vaccine? How would that be different in terms of its effect on people?
That's actually what we don't know. I will not say that it's worse or better, but it's a new technology. I think it has the same process of trying to help our bodies recognize a particular antigen of the virus. Its method is actually putting an mRNA into our cells, and our cells will produce the antigen on its surface. And our bodies will recognize those antigen.
Yeah. Ito ba yung sinasabi nila na mababago raw yung RNA ng gene, the human genome RNA will be modified by it? Yung ba yun?
I think they're not yet, unfounded pa yung I will not show you evidence that is actually what will happen. Okay. But the answer is we still don't know for sure.
So Dr. Homer must also do some research on that. Still too young. I mean, even scientists are still in disagreement whether these mRNA vaccines can somehow affect our own genetic code. So that's where really because this is a very new vaccine and this is a very new technology in using mRNA as a form of therapy. So I think we have to be more careful when we are giving these types of medical treatments, no? So I think, because again, mRNA.
And remember, they have the burden of proof of making sure it's safe. Hindi naman pwede sabihin it's safe and then let's see. The burden of proof should be theirs, and until it's proven safe, then I think that's where we start really using it.
So, what would be the reasonable time na mag-intay tayo? Kasi yung emergency use authorization, yun yung third phase trial eh. In fact, to roll out na, parang ito na yung fourth and final phase. Kaya lang, yun na nga, ginagamit na. So, what's the reasonable time for us tayo? Kulelak tayo sa, hindi naman kulelak, pero medyo baba tayo ng priority. What's the reasonable time period for waiting for the consequences of ano?
Kasi there's so many questions about this virus, even whether the vaccine will work up to 6 months. No? It may not actually work by the time 6 months na kasi it's such a new vaccine. No one even knows. The earliest patient that was given this was about 6 months ago. So ngayon pala pumapasok yung data. But I would wait 6 months when the phase 4 trials is finished. You might have long-term side effects from it. So why am I saying this? But that's how vaccines are. Vaccines are not really quickly developed. And we had our issues with Dengvax, where we did have a problem because we were trying to rush it in.
Well, Doc, with that in mind po, sabi niyo 6 months after phase 4, meron na bang nasa phase 4 or?
Yes. Meron na. Nasa sa UK and I think in the US they'll be starting soon. Or I think they've started already, December 9, I think.
But you were referring to 6 months after phase 4 or 6 months into phase 4. So in effect, wala pang, by your standards po, dapat wala pang pasado. Wala pang...
Well, ayaw naman sabihin my standards.
Sorry, I'm just trying to simplify kasi baka magulo yung mga tao eh. Just to be sure about it. Well, like you said po, you are not anti-vaxxers. You do believe in vaccines, but you also believe in the importance of making sure that the vaccines work and are safe. Tama naman po yun, di ba?
Correct.
With that in mind po, with all the things that are happening now, all the rush to get these vaccines into the public stream, and we're looking at what, baka first or second quarter, may bakuna sa Pilipinas. Baka lang.
First,
Um,
first.
from your perspectives po, would that be safe? Should we wait longer than the first half of the year? And so on down the line. In real terms po, in real terms.
Well, in real terms kasi ganito yun. Does the Philippines need the vaccine as soon as possible? That's my question. If you look at our numbers, we're not one of the countries that are worse off. The countries that are worse off are the European and the American countries. So that's why they're there already. So they're starting it out. We can actually wait for them. Because remember, we do want to lift the lockdowns. And one of the ways to lift the lockdowns is to reach herd immunity. And herd immunity can be reached faster with a vaccine. That is a fact. That is a known thing. Kaya nga, but of course, what if we can reach herd immunity through other safe means as well, without the vaccine? And do we really need to rush it? As Dr. Homer Limas mentioned, marami na nga nagsisiksikan sa Quiapo, sa Divisoria. Pero parang wala tayong increased numbers. Maybe we are near herd immunity. Maybe we don't even need the vaccine. I'm not saying for sure kasi yan medyo controversial topic din yan. But
I think we also have to, I think we also have to consider something with the vaccines. I think, kasi people might think when you get the vaccine, hindi ka na magkaka-COVID. That's the wrong impression, no? The vaccines were made so that if you do get COVID, you won't get a severe infection. Even Dr. Fauci admitted, the vaccines will not prevent you from getting the virus. Very important. The data or the objective there, or the primary outcome that they were measuring was how many people with COVID infection will have severe form of COVID, right? So if that's the main goal is to prevent you from having a severe form of COVID infection, why cannot we use early treatment? Treat patients early so that they won't have a severe form of infection. So it's the same thing. So we're trying to achieve the same goal, which is preventing people from having a severe form of infection. Therefore, you prevent them from being hospitalized, you prevent them from dying. I think that's what we have to look at and really consider.
Teka, magandang paghihimayan eh. So Doc, what you're saying is this. Tell me if I'm getting this right again. I mean, I do tend to be repetitious, pero it's also for the benefit of the viewers. So tell me if I'm getting this right. Ang sasabi po ninyo, the vaccines will not immunize you from the disease. It will immunize you from getting a bad case of the disease.
Yes.
So
that's the study. Yes.
You could still get sick, but you won't get badly sick.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's what these vaccines are hoping is that it won't give you a severe form of infection.
Okay, so my question is this. Will natural immunity give you permanent immunity?
Okay. In the medical history of vaccines, mas maganda ang natural immunity compared to vaccinated people. That's a fact. So
that's why if you remember some vaccine boosters.
Yeah,
but
certainly
natural immunity is more dangerous, certainly.
Yeah, and is it possible with flu viruses? Kasi yung flu, it recurs eh. Hindi naman siya kapareho ng measles, di ba? Ganun ba iba yan eh. It's not like polio or measles, it's a flu virus.
Yeah,
we're
not sure.
Pwede siyang bumalik, di ba?
Well, pwede siyang bumalik. Yeah. Pwede siyang bumalik if the virus will change or mutate. Your flu virus, that's why we have three different, because there are many different variations or mutations of the virus.
Yeah.
So so hopefully you don't want to have a mutated COVID virus.
But siyempre, we're trying to look at the coronaviruses. How did they behave?
Yes.
So one of the well-known coronaviruses was the SARS. And they found out that you can develop immunity up to 6 years.
6 years?
Yeah. But that's a natural, hindi sila binigyan ng vaccine.
Natural immunity on. Okay, I guess then the question is, because right now your voice, I mean your opinion is really out of the box, no? And let's just say that it's highly unlikely that the authorities right now will risk it. But
Yes.
if you were given a chance to actually try it out, what would be the worst case scenario if we did the targeted lockdown or isolation and allow the rest of the not vulnerable, uh, people in our community to get back to normal, to the old normal?
Yeah. Well, for one, our country has been on lockdown for 9 months. We're already in the worst case scenario. People are already losing their jobs, businesses are falling, people are getting hungry, the working class has been disenfranchised. So we are already in the worst case scenario. If we suddenly lift down the lockdowns, we're already in something positive. But what I'm saying is, yes, we agree there's still a risk. That's why we have to use the focus protection method. And to carry that focus protection, we will need government support as well. But ang maganda sa kanya, dahil focus na siya, the spending is not as much, we don't need as much manpower, we just need mass media to help us with the information on how to protect the elderly and the vulnerable. So I think the worst
So are
case
you
scenario
saying,
is, yeah,
Doc, are you saying that the fears of a surge, of a second wave, of higher mortality, they're baseless?
yes, I will say that it's baseless because based on just all the studies done already, 22 published papers versus practically none to show that it works. That's the thing. So and then there's this plan 2019 WHO plan that we should just carry out, which is really protecting the sick and isolating them well. That's the way to do it. Talaga na overestimate natin itong ano. Let's admit it, we overestimated the coronavirus. I'm not saying it's not deadly, but we overestimated it.
Are you also saying that we should start resume face-to-face classes, and we could increase the number of people in churches, for example, because Christmas is approaching and more people are going to churches? Are you saying this? Because they're also physical distancing.
Yeah, there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
With 0 to 9 years old, yes, medyo pwede na nga sila pumasok kasi napaka-low. But the problem will be the teachers. So teachers who are above 60 years old may have to continue with their online teaching. And then there will be children who might be diabetic, type 1s.
Yeah.
They might have to continue with their online teaching.
Online?
Yeah. Now, yung above 9 years old na students, yung I think that's grade 12 to college, they might have to be treated like adults, but still the risk is low. But ang maganda sa age na yun, pwede iba mag-dorm muna. And it's not a permanent thing kasi most likely if you start to mix this up, you might be able to reach herd immunity sooner. Not intentionally, but so hindi naman kailangan dorm sila for life. But they can move into a family without elderly, yung mga multi-age families. So they might have to move there temporarily. So we have to find strategies pa rin. Ano? But again, they have a choice. If they still want to continue with online teaching, yes, they can still continue. So church, I think the church is a very good question because ang dami na nagkaklamo na pwede ba our freedom of religion, etc. Yes, I think we should find ways as well. I think kailangan pa rin mag-social distancing. So that's one thing. But again, we should be very strict with the symptoms who comes in. We should be very strict if they're above 60 years old. Not that hindi sila pwede pumasok. That, again, yung binention ko rin na there might be a time zone for them to come in na vulnerable. And during that time zone na vulnerable, they really must have to exercise social distancing, even wearing a mask, etc. But if you do not belong to that group, then pwede naman crowded, pero again, with some precautions pa rin. Especially if you start this out, you really have to come in there gradually. We don't really want to overwhelm our hospitals, just in case.
Dr. Lim, yeah.
Sige po. But we're almost out of time, so let's, sige po.
Dr. Lim, baka you want to add something to that?
Yeah. Final words?
Yeah, final word. Nakamute yata si Dr.
Nakamute kayo.
Nakamute
So,
kayo.
so I mean, there are many, so there are many ways of how we approach this problem. So we're just offering you other options that we can actually apply quickly on a large scale basis. In fact, if you look at Davao, Cebu, we wish that they would do at least an early outpatient. Then their hospitals would slowly have a lesser number of hospitalization and ICU bed utilization. So if we just apply some of them, if they don't want to do all of them, at least do something to at least address some of the what we call the missing areas wherein we can improve our approach to this pandemic.
Okay. Dr. Homer Lim and Dr. Iggy Agbayani of the Concerned Doctors and Citizens of the Philippines. Doctors, maraming salamat for a very fascinating discussion tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Doctor.
you. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Yeah.
Fascinating, di ba?
Oo nga.
Oh, yeah. Really.
Controversial and quite
Yeah. Well,
talagang
it makes
counterintuitive.
sense. It makes sense. It's counterintuitive, but it does make sense.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
I'm sure all the businessmen want it.
That's true.
I wonder kung nakipag-usap sa DOH.
I was gonna ask
Easy,
that. If they've ever been invited to any of the IATF conferences or
Well,
meetings. But
more
I
likely
doubt
never.
But it's interesting, di ba? Something new.
Yeah. Anyway, fascinating Wednesday. I guess that's it for today. Tomorrow is, 2 days before the weekend. So, there you go. Well, that will be all for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope that this discussion will keep the conversation going. I'm Edgar Pan News.
I'm Mami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, and we are One News.